Well, good evening, everyone. This is Bobby Stafford with the Granby Church of Christ. It's good to kind of be back online on the evening. It's been quite a while. Many things have happened the past few months, and hopefully we'll be a little more regular with our Sunday evening lessons. We're going to continue in just a moment looking at Mark's account of the gospel, and we're going to start in Mark chapter 2. Where Mark tells us about Jesus healing a paralytic. Again, Mark chapter 2, and we'll begin in just a moment. All right, let's begin. This particular account is, of course, one of the miracles of Jesus. Probably one of the more well-known of his miracles. It's found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and Matthew 9 and Luke 5. But we'll focus mainly on Mark's account in Mark chapter 2. And then we're going to look at how people responded. That's one of the most important things from this lesson, is looking how people responded to this particular miracle. And there's quite a few lessons here. So, what's happening? Mark chapter 2. Let's read the first 2 verses. And again he, referring to Jesus, entered Capernaum after some days, and it was heard that he was in the house. Immediately many gathered together, so that there was no longer room to receive them, not even near the door, and he preached the word to them. We understand, first of all, this takes place in Capernaum. Matthew's account says this is Christ's own city. This was kind of his, you might say, unofficial base for his public ministry, the one that took place in Galilee, his first one. And so he is in a house. We're not really told much about it, other than word got out and he was preaching and the place was filled to the brim. Absolutely no room whatsoever for anyone else to get in. So that posed a problem for some individuals. Verses 3 and 4. Then they came to him bringing a paralytic who was carried by 4 men. And when they could not come near him because of the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. So when they had broken through, they let down the bed on which the paralytic was lying. So this paralytic, obviously, he's completely immobile. I mean, he can't, he can't move himself whatsoever. And so he's confined to a stretcher. And that's the only way he can move about, is someone carry him to wherever he needs to go. Well, because the house is so full, there's no room. So the paralytic, with his friends who are carrying him, they can't get in. It's too big of a crowd. So what do? They say, we're not going to let that stop us. So they go to the roof. And of course, the roofs back then were totally different. They were flat, and they were much easier to go into. Of course, our type of roofs today, with wooden rafters and shingles and everything, that wouldn't be an easy way in. But back then, with those houses, it was totally different. But it still took effort to get him into the house. So it says when they had broken through, so that implies some effort, implies some energy and some time. They were able to let the bed down that he was lying on. So what happens? Verse 5. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven you." Now that verse is a whole sermon in and of itself. When Jesus saw their faith. Now faith isn't something that we normally think about as being visible. We think about faith being something personal, inward, immaterial, but yet Jesus says, and it's a telling remark, Jesus saw their faith. What did he see? He saw the actions that were prompted by their belief. And so there we have that connection between faith and works. And of course, when you go to James' epistle, we see how those in James chapter 2 are connected. Faith without works is dead. So, someone can say they have faith, but if that faith doesn't urge them, prompt them to act in some way, then that's a dead faith, which is a faith that cannot save. So Jesus said he saw, or it says when Jesus saw their faith, that's what he sees. So, what does he say? I'm going to heal you. No. He says, son, your sins are forgiven you. And of course, Jesus knew what saying those words were going to result in. He knew without a doubt what kind of response he was going to get from the religious leaders. But that's what he told the paralytic. It says, your sins are forgiven you. Now we go to Matthew's account. Matthew adds one thing I think that's worth reading. Let's go to Matthew 9. Matthew 9, let's read the first 2 verses. It's the same account. So he got into a boat, crossed over, and came to his own city. There's the Capernaum we talked about a while ago. Then behold, they brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, son, be of good cheer. Your sins are forgiven you. Be of good cheer. And of course, hearing that someone's, your sins are forgiven you, that is certainly something that would cause you to cheer, to be happy and to be thankful for. So, it seems strange that that's what Jesus would say first. But again, Jesus is using this as he did all the time as a teaching moment. This is a classic teaching moment. Jesus doesn't say what people were expecting him to say. And so he's going to use this to teach some great lessons here. So, what happens? Let's go to Mark 2, verses 6 and 7. So Jesus had just said, son, your sins are forgiven you. And some of the scribes were sitting there and reasoning in their hearts. Reasoning in their hearts. Why does this man speak blasphemies like this? Who can forgive sins but God alone? And of course, there's a lot of truth in that. Who can forgive sins besides God? Nobody. So when Jesus says, son, your sins are forgiven you, the implication is he is divine. He is God. And he has the power to forgive sins. Well, the scribes know that if someone says your sins are forgiven you, they are claiming to be God. So they were reasoning in their hearts, and that's why they said, why does this man speak blasphemies? Because Jesus, who they're saying is just a mere man, if he's claiming to be God to forgive sins, that's blasphemy. That's what they're saying. So that's why they're saying, why does this man speak blasphemies? Luke's account says there's also Pharisees there with the scribes. And then those two groups are typically together quite a bit in the 4 accounts of the gospel, scribes and Pharisees. Well, anyway, they weren't speaking out loud in that sense. They were reasoning in their hearts these things. They were silently accusing Jesus of blasphemy. So, let's see how the story goes on. And hopefully we won't have any eruptions. It's starting to thunder here, so we are predicted to have some bad weather, so hopefully we'll avoid it long enough to finish our lesson. All right, verse 8. But immediately, there's that word that Mark loves, immediately. But immediately, when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they reasoned thus within themselves, he said to them, "Why do you reason about these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Arise, take up your bed and walk'? But you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins." He said to the paralytic, "I say to you, arise, take up your bed, and go to your house." Now, one of the things that's remarkable is maybe kind of easy for us to gloss over. They hadn't said these things out loud. But Jesus, because he's God, was able to read their minds. He read their minds, and he says, "Why do you reason about these things in your heart?" So there, Jesus has already proven that he's God, because man can't read someone's thoughts. But Jesus just did, because they were saying these things inside, silently. They were thinking these things. But yet Jesus knows exactly what they're thinking, and he tells them what they're thinking. Well, they should have immediately gone, "This guy's reading our minds. This isn't a man. This has to be God." So Jesus says, again, this is the teaching moment. Which is it easier to say? "Your sins are forgiven," or "Rise, take up your bed and walk"? Well, it's really easy to say your sins are forgiven. Why? Because no one can see that. No one can see someone's sins being forgiven. I mean, it's something that is not visible. So people can easily say, "Oh, your sins are forgiven you." But Jesus says now, to prove a point, this is teaching moment, he says, to show you that I can forgive sins, I'm going to do what? I'm going to tell the man, "Arise, take up your bed, and go to your house." I'm going to prove to you I am truly deity. They should have seen it when he read their minds. But now he's telling them, okay, I'm going to prove it again very outwardly. I'm going to prove to you, here we have a paralytic, and he can't move at all. He's totally confined to the stretcher. Has no ability, had to have his friends bring him, let him down into the house. And so Jesus says, I'm going to show you that I can forgive sins because I'm going to heal this guy. And that's exactly what he does. He heals the man of his paralysis. See, Jesus has the power here, and he's showing them to do both things. He can heal someone of a physical calamity, of some physical illness. He can also heal someone of their spiritual illnesses. So he's not just a physical healer, he's a spiritual healer, and that's the point he is bringing to them. He's making known as clear as possible that because he's divine, because he's deity, he can forgive sins. Well, let's go ahead with our story. So Jesus says, I say to you, arise, take up your bed, and go to your house. Immediately he arose, took up the bed, and went out in the presence of them all, so that all were amazed and glorified God, saying, we never saw anything like this. And of course they didn't. So Jesus, all he has to do is speak. There's no, like some of the so-called healers today, and there aren't any. There are no such thing as miraculous healers today. They claim to be on TV and so forth, but they're all fake. None of them can heal anybody. But Jesus here, all he has to do, he just speaks. That's how the world came into existence. We go back to Genesis 1. God just spoke. Well, that's what God's doing here. He's just speaking. God speaks, tells the man, take up your bed. So not only can he walk, but he's suddenly, someone that's been paralyzed and can't walk at all, especially for any length of time, their muscles and everything have atrophied. And so normally they would have to spend time getting their muscles back, but not this guy. Miraculously, he gets up, totally healed, has all the strength in his muscles, because he's able to actually pick up his own bed, the one that his friends had let him down in. So he has enough strength to actually pick up his own bed and go. And he went out in the presence of them all. Everybody saw it. Luke's account includes the fact that he went glorifying God. And of course the people were amazed because they'd never seen anything like this. Of course they hadn't. If we go back to Matthew's account, Matthew adds one thing here that's worth noting. In Matthew 9, verse 8, he says, "Now when the multitude saw it, they marveled and glorified God, who had given such power to men." Given such power to men. And he would later say that their amazement was kind of joined with fear. Joined with fear. That's Luke's account. So when you look at all three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all kind of, supplement one another so that you get the whole picture. A man is healed, completely healed, everything that was wrong with him. The people were amazed, and Jesus' power, of course, was made known throughout the area. But most importantly, God was glorified. God was glorified. And so we see from this how that, and Christ showed this, that he had the power to forgive sins. This isn't the only place, of course, that's mentioned that. There's other places that mention it as well. But he has the power to forgive sins because of who he is. Not just a mere man, but God who came to this earth in the form of a man. So a very interesting, very important, very worthwhile miracle for us to focus our attention on because there's such great lessons in it. Well, thank you for watching, and the Lord willing, we'll be able to do more of these on a regular basis. Thank you again.